and it won't be won't be recorded. Then let me just check this. Okay, it's working on YouTube. I can stop fretting. All right. Well, hello and welcome to Left of the Projector. I am your host Evan, and this week we are talking about the movie Antz, which came out 25 years ago. Hard to believe, 1998. The DreamWorks film, which if you listen to an episode I don't know 20 something, Smirk, who's on here, we discussed Bug's Life. So I guess this is the uh, successor or the companion podcast to that one. I don't know the word, but we'll have a lot to talk about. And joining me, as I already said, I have Smirk Gently, I have Destiny, and I also have Alex. Thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Of course, and I guess I should have also, Destiny. Maybe you can just quickly before we get in, you have a podcast, so that everyone should go listen to as well. So
Thank
maybe why don't you
you.
tell everyone about it?
Yeah, so I do have a podcast. It's called Closeted History. We talk about queer and trans history, um, and all kinds of stuff, media, movies. Yeah, definitely check it out.
Awesome, thanks. And I don't know if I don't know if anyone else has any other before we get into the film. Other things they want to mention. You know, things they're working on or anything like that. But then we can talk about ants and ticks. I guess no, not ticks. Termites.
Termites.
Yes.
Termites. Yeah.
Well, I am actually just about to finish a new episode on the Compton cafeteria riots.
Hmm.
Because for a long time, at least I thought that Stonewall was the first like LGBTQ plus rebellion. And then I found out that it was the Compton cafeteria riots. And while I was doing the research for this episode, I found out that there was one even before then, called Cooper's Donuts riots. So it's been really cool, like, doing the research and finding out that I was wrong multiple times. So, and that episode will be coming out in a couple of weeks. So I'm excited to share it with y'all and share just in general.
Awesome. We'll
Yeah.
keep an eye out for that. But I was when I was watching this movie, it had been a long time since I had seen Ants. I'd seen A Bug's Life a few times, but I actually had forgotten that Woody Allen is in this. I guess is the main voice. And the first
Mm.
thing I thought, like, this might be the only Woody Allen movie you're going to hear on this podcast. It's almost kind of like a weird throwback to hear him talking. I'm like, maybe,
And
but
even in this movie, they can't pair him with like an age appropriate person because he's a full like 20 years older than Sharon Stone.
that's true. I
Yeah,
also had forgotten Sharon Stone was in it.
that was my first note. Was like, fuck, Woody Allen. Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, literally the first thing I wrote, like, this is Woody Allen, and this is the last one I'll ever have of Woody Allen, you know, on the movie, on the show. But yeah, Sharon Stone, yeah, just as to mention some of the other main voices, it has a great cast. You have Gene Hackman, who I think is excellent in this. You have Sylvester Stallone, Dan Aykroyd, Anne Bancroft, Danny Glover, Jennifer Lopez, John Mahoney. It has a pretty amazing Christopher Walken. I forgot too. So it's a real good cast. So I don't know. Maybe just everyone's first impressions of this movie, given kind of the movie it is, and probably at the time, I don't feel like the majority of people were watching this movie. Kids and even adults were thinking, "Oh, I just left this movie that's really about labor and capitalism." But you can't watch it and not think that unless well, I guess you could. Here we won't. Here we don't have that.
Yeah, I don't remember when I first watched it. It had to be like around the time it came out because if I'm remembering correctly, it was like a weird situation where somebody from Disney or Pixar who was working on A Bug's Life, like there was a split. One of them went over to DreamWorks and they developed like a similar sort of film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, it came out when 1998. So I
Yeah.
don't know, 7. I don't remember. But like, yeah, watching it now, it's kind of hard not to see it through that lens. Um, it's very like if you follow the themes through to their natural conclusion, it is kind of radical, and it's interesting that they always end up using like a lot of these movies centered around like insects and bugs and stuff end up having these really interesting themes.
Very Kafka-esque.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that's also interesting, I looked up that whole, like, went down that rabbit hole of the split with DreamWorks, but I looked into the people who wrote the screenplay and the directors, and I couldn't find anything about them that was related to anything left, labor, nothing. Like, I almost couldn't find out how they came up with this movie. And clearly they knew what they were doing because there's lines in this movie that are, they refer to seizing the means of production. It's very much this individual versus the collective, which we'll talk about. So I don't know. They made a movie, a labor movie, accidentally.
Yeah, that's actually what like prompted me to rewatch the movie. I saw it like, just scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or somewhere, and it was that scene where they're like, it's the workers that own the means of production. And I was like, no fucking way. Like, I remember A Bug's Life, but I didn't remember Ants. Like, I was 5, so when it came out in 98, and yeah, so I had to rewatch it, and I was like, "Okay, this was definitely more radical than I remember it being when I was 5."
Yeah, say I think I was like also similar in age, and I just remember it being darker, like literally just like the colors, but just being like, damn, this is kind of, it just feels intense. Especially for me, I even wrote this down too. Was like the war scene. Like
Mm-hmm.
I teared up again as an adult, because it was just like I was like, holy shit, this is like heavy, in comparison to like A Bug's Life, which I haven't seen in years, but I just remember it being really like bubbly and light. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, also has like uh, themes of like of labor as well, but this one is just, I don't know. It's like very like direct. You know?
Yeah, it's like a huge tonal shift too. You know what it reminds me of is Starship Troopers. That scene, like when they first land on like the bug planet when they're doing the whole well, because Evan, you did an episode on that.
Yeah.
But when they, they land, it's just a massacre because they don't know what they're getting into. But like the vibe of it is very much the same. They're just getting destroyed. And like 2 seconds before that, he's just dancing in a bar with Princess. It's like, oh, everybody's dead. Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it does. If you, I don't know if this was like the intention of this movie. I mean, it had to be where you. I think the colors in A Bug's Life are really, vibrant and bright. But then the colors of all the ants in this are very dark. They're kind of living in. They're most of the movie takes place, inside of a cave, whereas A Bug's Life is mostly outside and kind of. I don't know. I don't know what to I mean. I'm not trying to compare the two, but I think it is worth noting that this movie is darker themed. Maybe that's what you're talking about. I think it, you know, and I mean it also leads to the very first part of the movie, which is basically. Didn't remember the movie, and Z is doing his little monologue, and I'm thinking, I wrote down, this is like the kind of thing you tell your therapist, and then there's the therapist there, he's talking to him, like, oh, perfect. Maybe I had memory hold that in my head from watching it, but it was literally him like, I hate my job, it's pointless. I mean, how many people haven't woken up every day, or well, maybe not every day, days, and just been like, this is pointless. I'm just gonna go work for a company who's gonna exploit my labor and pay me not well enough, so on, so on.
Especially these days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I guess I'm curious what you guys think, because I feel like there's also like the slogans. I think it was like they either said it or it was like it was written somewhere. So like free time is for training or something like that. It just reminded me of like 1984, and how there was like all those like really kind of intense like propaganda like from the government. It was interesting because I was watching this. It's like it's obviously about collective power, but at the same time, it depicts it kind of in a negative light, right? Kind of that individualism, or kind of like, hey, like think for yourself. I don't know. I mean, obviously, yeah, I'm really curious on what you guys think because I just feel like it was kind of like, when they were working together with that one ball, when they finally able to get out, etc. But I don't know. I felt like it could be seen either way. You know what I mean?
I think it starts out with in the framing of Z having that discussion with his therapist, and in like the most like typical of a therapy situation ever, he's like, yeah, no, you are insignificant, you don't matter, like don't worry about the systemic problems, it's you, and just deal with it. In the context of that, it does show like collectivism in a poor light, but I think that's only because the workers who are like making the ball and like knocking stuff down, they're so entirely disconnected from what it is that they're producing. Like they don't even know what we later find out they're digging toward. So like they don't really have a connection to it. So it's not like they're working for each other, they're working together for somebody else. And I think that's why initially his reaction is very like you said, like individualistic. But then later on it changes.
Well, and like those are, two very like one's at the beginning and one's at the end. So like, you really the beginning, that like therapy session really like sets the foundation for like seeing the isolation of the worker, because he's like, oh, I'm insignificant and like what I'm doing doesn't matter. But then like once we get to the point where like they make the ball and they climb up and like save the day, so to speak, like it took time to get to that like collective effort. And he takes like a more individualistic like approach to things. It is very like kind of neoliberal ish, of like I just wrote down when he was trying to get with the queen, like that's kind of like his attempt at upward social mobility, but it's like an individualistic approach to a systemic problem. Like he's thinking, oh, well, if I get with her, then like I won't have to work, nothing, I'll have no problems. But then it just works out for him. Like at first and in the beginning of the movie, he really doesn't like regard anyone other than himself. But through like, his journey and like learning more and trying to get with the queen and failing, then like he learns to care about people and like realizes that their struggles are some of his same struggles. And so like we start in the beginning where he's completely isolated to the end where like they do come together collectively. The only like I guess issue I really had was that like the end doesn't really offer a solution. Like they come together, they do the thing, but like now this feudal system with the queen still like overseeing people, and now he's back with the queen or the princess, so like his life has worked out, but for everybody else like there wasn't any kind of like systemic change. So the ending was kind of bleak, at least for me.
I agree.
Yeah, I felt this a similar sense. I mean, I get this. This is a common theme when talking about these kinds of movies and just movies in general, where there is this sense of some kind of revolution or whatever it might be. They never come up with any kind of solution. It's just kind of back to a slightly better version of the original,
Right.
where everyone is still kind of in the same position, but it's they're happy. Yeah, they're singing while they're working for the giant corporation instead of telling their therapist how they're really upset. I don't know. It's yeah. I mean, that's getting to the end, but I do agree with that it's just yeah.
I think the one good thing is that I mean, we could, I don't know, do you want to hold off on this? I feel bad, I'm like jumping ahead, but I feel like at the point at which he says like it's for the good of the colony, and he's like, we are the colony, like what are you talking about? Like that's the one like aha moment where like they're actually all working together for like their common good, and not just they're realizing they're all part of something, and this at least is something that does benefit them all. Because up until that point, it's like everything they're doing, like, yes, they're disconnected from it and they don't really understand what it is they're working toward. They just know they have to work. but it's also like it's just growth for the sake of growth because they never really say what the megatunnel is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, well, we have to expand. We can't just not. And it's like, well, I'm sure like 10 of you get squished every day, and like there's probably like there's not that much of a population. Like I don't know. Like the general mandible guy, Gene Hackman. He frames. There's a deleted scene where he goes to the Queen about an overpopulation problem, and that's why they're building the tunnel. But like nobody else knows that. It's just between them. So like none of the workers know what they're doing or why.
Yeah, and you also have the middle manager who pops in every once in a while, who's getting everyone to work harder, but he also doesn't really know what's going on. He doesn't have any sense of this. It's just he gets paid a little more to do the demanding and the yelling and the punishing and everything, which is I felt like that was one of the very relatable aspects of just working in late stage capitalism or just in general. You always have this middle manager. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that I think the scene where they're at the beginning showing how he is Z is mad that he's sort of like born as a worker. He didn't get to choose. And I think that's also my note that I wrote here is sort of how everyone is sort of like born into where you are from. Like you don't decide where you live, what your circumstances are, what job you're going to get, your possibilities in life. And they're just popping people out. I'm like, oh, you're a soldier, you're a worker, you're a soldier. It's very regimented, and really it's not that far off. I mean, it kind of simplified, right?
It's like the zip code thing. Like the zip code you're born into has a like extremely huge determining effect on the rest of your life. It's exactly like that.
I mean, I think it reminds you of the fact that like, I mean, unless you're a fucking billionaire and you're born one, everyone is born a worker. You know what I mean? Obviously with different abilities and the kind of like society that we live in makes it really difficult for others. But like we're always working, right? Like in order to be able just to like live, we have to work. So I agree. I think that one was really and then just that manager was kind of just like slightly kind of incompetent, you know what I mean? Just like, and I think that one is very relatable. And the one character I really liked was like the right hand man of the general. What was his name?
Cutter.
Yeah, that one. Cause he knows, like he is aware, and you can tell that he's like having kind of like an issue. Like he's aware of what the plan is. He's like he wants to kind of like fall in line or whatever. And I feel his character for me was very interesting. And yeah, like it also made it kind of like hero-esque right at the end. But it just reminds you of people that have, like you were saying, Evan, a little bit more money or like a little bit more power positions within capitalism now. And it's just like, are people willing to kind of make that choice? And that because it is a conscious decision, that if we're going to continue, I always think about like HR, like are you going to continue to be just following the orders of like the bosses because you're slightly in that circle, but ultimately like you're also like replaceable, you know?
Yeah, I think it's about like creating like artificial divisions. Like you see it between like the supervisor and the workers. And then you see it between in big part between the soldiers and the workers too. Like at one point they get in a fight in the bar because the princess shows up and just starts running her mouth because she's so out of touch. She doesn't realize like this tiny guy is going to get pummeled. And the guy goes to hit him and he's like, he's just a worker. Like, who cares? But there's not a lot of unity between those two groups. And it's fostered by this weird attitude that like, well, workers, they don't really do anything. They're weak. And the workers feel that the soldiers don't really do anything. They just go and like they get all the glory and they beat shit up and that's it.
I think that is interesting where they have sort of like the role reversal where his friend, who's played by Sylvester Stallone, what's the character, Weaver, right? I think they trade places. I know we're going a little ahead, but they trade places where he's now a worker, and turns out because he's very big and strong, he's actually a great worker. He can, he enjoys it. He realizes the thing that I was told I had to do actually is the thing that I hate, and the thing that I wasn't allowed to do, the thing that I'm passionate about, I'm actually good at and I enjoy. And the opposite, I think, is true of Z. Like, he's terrified as a soldier. He's just kind of doing it on this mission he has. But it's I think it's also a good aspect of just most people don't get to pursue the thing that maybe they really want to or that they're good at because it's not profitable, can't live on it, you know. So.
And they don't have a say, you know. That's what he keeps saying, is that he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah. Can we maybe go back to the general, like, and talk about his eugenics, like, very fascist plan he's got going on? Because like I don't know if I also saw like the scene that was like the deleted scene, like you said, but like I mean they figure out that he like wants to go and start a new society with the princess, and like, you know, oh, we'll just have to start over, like, you know, fuck all these people, like they'll just die in the tunnel. And yeah, like, I mean, kind of intense for a kids movie, going back to what we were saying before, but like,
For real.
yeah, that was a scary plan.
Well, he just wants to start a military dictatorship. I mean, that's really what he's going for. He says, I mean, that I think I have the script up, and he's talking about like the precision, the order. He's a very like regimented, single-minded thinking of just, this is the way that we do things. And he's essentially taken over all of the labor and created a plan that only a few people know about to wipe out the colony. And so, yeah, I mean, and he's manipulating the queen. He's marrying the princess. It's all like this. It feels like this movie could easily be like not a cartoon movie, but be a, you know, a war movie, or I don't know.
I was trying to like, I was doing some research, and I'm trying to like rack my brain, like what, like out of like the hundreds upon hundreds of military coups, like what could this best be compared to? And it's, you know, it turns out it's really hard to find one where, like, at least in recent memory, like the US isn't involved somehow. So there's not really like a one-to-one like comparison, but the way their government is structured is kind of similar to like late Imperial Japan. Like there's the head of state, which is technically like the emperor posthumously, or like the queen in this case. But then much of government and like civilian life is run by the military. And of course, there's like a couple different coups in like Japanese history, but yeah, the way it's structured is very interesting to me. Like in A Bug's Life, there's no like military at all. It's just like there's a council, and then there's like the queen and everything. But yeah, I'm like curious who they modeled it after. But yeah, he's like a eugenicist. He's like trying to like purify the colony and start a new one. So he's definitely like a stand-in for like a Hitler type.
Yeah, the like big issue there though, I think, is like, again, kind of putting it like on the individual rather than like how systemically I mean, eugenics is in our medical and healthcare system. Like, you know, we as well, I mean, we're all here in the United States, and like at least here our foundations are white supremacy and eugenics. And so like, you know, we have to really think about structurally and systematically how those things are within the structures of society. And like they just put it on one person of like, oh, well, he's the bad guy, now he's gone. And even though there isn't really a solution, there's like a fake solution because they're happy, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and there were definitely people who at the end were like pulling like the other ants out. But some of those dudes in that group definitely knew the plan and were like part of it. So that's another huge unresolved thing. Like, I know some of those guys were in the room and saw the map that saw the thing leading to the lake.
Yeah, it's like the great man theory, which I guess is kind of like how they refer to a lot of societies. Like, oh, it's just like the one smart general or leader in British history that did everything themselves. And they again, I think it's easier in a movie, especially what's supposed to be a kids movie, which kind of, I mean, as a kid, I guess you could watch this and kind of not really see the things to
It
it.
definitely had a lot of curse words though, and was
It
like
did.
kind of low key inappropriate. So I was like, okay, some of these things are definitely for the adults.
Yeah, like can we talk about for a second how overly sexualized and how like big the ass was for Jennifer Lopez? Like I get it, but like it was just like it was a little too much.
It's like an ant, but thick. Yeah, like for no good reason. Yeah,
For no good reason. So yeah, we
like
gotta
the
like
Angelina
sexualize
Jolie
it.
fish in what was that
Yeah.
movie?
Well, yeah, well, and I mean, they also very much sexualize the queen as she's just there as like the person just having babies for the state, essentially. I mean, it's her role in like a colony, but in the sense of this, it's very much like, oh, well, you're just having children so that we can use them for war, kind of idea. We're just going to send you out to war, and in this case, Mandible is sending them out to a war that they know they're going to lose, which is also funny because ants eat termites, so I don't know why they chose termites, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think in real life, like ants eat termites, so they could have picked a different bug. But
I mean, maybe
I don't
that
know.
was intentional though, because
True.
I didn't know that ants eat termites.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Huh.
They eat
It's almost
aphids.
like they threw the fight.
Mm.
That actually, I think now is where I was thinking that scene very much reminds me of when they landed in. Now I can't unthink the Starship Troopers, especially since they like explode and there's like the thing that the acid that eats through the ants when they're fighting. But you were saying something, Alex, about the Jennifer Lopez character, and I can't remember what it was I was going to mention. Is I feel like they very much stereotypically chose some of both like the voices. I don't know. I felt like there was some maybe questionable decisions in that. I mean, again, Woody Allen, I guess this was when he was still popular and you could
It
have
was
him in a movie and
1998.
yeah, it's the
Different
90s were a
times.
weird time. Yeah, but having
Yeah.
Jennifer Lopez be that specific character and also the kind of character that she played too, I feel like it's almost like they
Mm-hmm.
wrote that role for her to be that
Yeah.
character. And it felt a little bit strange.
Yeah, I don't know how I felt about the roles of like the female roles in this one, to be honest. Uh, yeah, yeah. On top of that, like just um the what did you call it, Evan? The one man, the great man theory or something
The
like that.
Great
Like
Man
I
Theory,
mean,
yeah.
like yeah, like I get it. Like it's a movie and but I hate it because I feel like we try to replicate art right in the real world or vice versa, and it's and specifically thinking about labor, like especially now, like I think a lot of folks are always like, obviously I myself included, I get very excited when I see and I'm inspired by like working class heroes, etc., right? But like it's just, I think it's just so detrimental to the actual like movement when we want to actually like create a very strong militant labor movement, because we're perceiving it's just like, we're like the queen or the princess or this one guy or this one soldier or like, the general being like you were saying, like you kill the one general who's like basically has like he's like trying to wipe out everyone. It's like eugenics, and it's just like that's just not how it works though, and I know, again, I know it's a cartoon, but I just feel like that's just one of my issues just with art in general, or just like, or just with life in general, because we see that even now of like, oh, this like that one person or that one thing. It's just like that's not how it works. Like that's not even the reality of it.
And you see that kind of play out too, because as they're all rallying around Z later on, when they find out what he's done and he's missing, they're all just standing there and singing, and they're like united. but not behind a cause, behind a person. And as soon as the general comes up and he's like, well, he makes this like populist sort of argument. He's like, well, he doesn't care about us. Where is he? We, person who doesn't even consider the other ones like worthy of life, like we make the colony. We do everything. Where the hell is Z? And you know what? Just because you guys are so awesome, you get the day off. And just like that, like any sort of like class consciousness and like unity there is just dispelled immediately.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but like people are at a level of desperation that like, what else are they gonna do? Also,
Yeah, but that's why I think it's so important. I mean, I know this is just like this is not specifically about the movie, but it's just like that's why I think it's so important if there are individuals that are getting into these positions or these roles and like or people are perceiving them as like you know heroes or like celebrities or whatever. It's just like it's you need to be super intentional and you need to be reminded that it's like it's not about you. And we I get it, it's difficult, but ultimately that needs to be a practice like within
Yeah.
just like the labor movement in general.
Yeah, because you can take out a person, but that's only if you're propping the person up to be like the cornerstone of your ideology. Then it's susceptible, it's vulnerable. But if you're united around an idea and a cause, that's completely different. That's a lot harder to break down than a person. Yeah, totally with you there.
Is there
Yeah.
any movies? Have you guys seen it ever like or any cartoon movies that kind of or anything that's more about a cause instead of it being like
V for Vendetta, kind of, because he says that. That's why he wears the mask and everything. It's like
right?
a man can be killed for an idea, but that's a tricky one too. It's not very well like demonstrated in a lot of media.
I mean, I think American, especially if you're thinking about movies in general, and I talk about this a lot, is that just American movies have to be made by they're being made by giant corporations who they themselves are literally exploiting workers, as we have people who are are on strike for writers and actors. And so I mean that's not the message that they want to portray, and I think that it impacts the people who are then writing the movies because they know they have to write a movie this way so that the studio will pick it up, which sucks. And I think that's why eventually on this podcast I'll be doing some Soviet movies from the 50s, 60s, and you see a much different. George Lucas has said this. It's I think I said this on a recent episode. Is that George Lucas has said that those movies, as long as you kind of didn't criticize the government in a certain way, you can make any movie you wanted, and it really is true because you had more collective movies. There were labor movies like that in the Soviet Union and other places. So even Europe too, I think. But I think
I
it's
think
an American problem.
yeah, and I think in like books and stuff, it's better demonstrated because then you have like the like if it's a movie, you're less likely to get more of like the multiple perspectives sort of thing. Like I used to really hate reading books that like would each chapter would be like a different person. But like to tell stories like that are about like ideas and not just people, I think something like that. I think it's a better medium for it, but that's just because I read a lot.
There's just a movie I was going to recommend. It's not a American movie. It's a well, someone can say something while I'm looking it up. Oh, it's called Fox and His Friends. It's actually a Rainer Werner Fassbinder movie. Um, Takes place in the 1970s, and specific in this movie in particular, and a lot of other movies, it's very much this class aspect to it. And I mean, this one isn't about labor specifically, but they are able to convey that it's not a single kind of individual. It's more of a collective piece, within the community. So I really do think it's an American creation to to stigmatize labor in general. Where I think this
yeah.
movie is good. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just was gonna say that, like, honestly, I don't think that that's gonna change anytime soon, especially like with the way that movies are being made now. Like the mid-budget movie is gone, unfortunately. Like it's just either like a huge, production based on like IP that they've purchased, trying to get nostalgia to strike a chord, or it's like a superhero movie or some bullshit. Like that, I mean, that's it. Like there aren't any mid budget movies coming out, and like people, I mean, comedies aren't really coming out. Like I feel like the whole industry has changed like so much. So, we're really not going to see anybody making any movies about like leftist themes.
Right.
Yeah, except I think like Triangle of Sadness, but it's probably the closest you get. But that was a fairly lower budget movie, and they're more rare. Right? It's unfortunate. You're right. I didn't think about this. There's like no comedies
Mm-mm.
anymore. That was the '90s and the 2000s, and they're just gone.
Well, because it's either like an action movie, usually like superhero movie that's got some comedy in it, or like a romance movie that has comedy in it, and like that's it.
Or like torture porn. It's like a new Saw movie or something. And there's not a lot of like there's not a lot of variety there. I think part of it too is like so much of American media, especially things like that, it's kind of like focused around the outline of like the hero's journey. Like it's very much focused on like one person. So it doesn't leave a lot of room for like collective growth and like a focus on like a diverse group of people instead of just like the one guy fixing everything.
And it's interesting because I think like as even we're discussing it in the movie, like in the context of the movie and how like, I didn't really like that part. Like I also think that like today's generation, like Gen Z is taking no shit, y'all. Like they're over the hero's journey, like, new things were like I just feel like things are changing and we're kind of like in the midst of that and get to kind of experience it in real time. And so I think that movies are gonna change because things are changing too.
Yeah, and if I could add, what I was thinking right now too is I used to live in Mexico City for 2 years, and they have this thing called La Cineteca Nacional, which is it's like a theater, but it's like all independent films and it's like all international. It's super sick and it's super cheap. It's like it's it's controlled by the government. It's awesome if you guys ever get to go, but it's like yeah, it's amazing. They have really great films. I can't think of any right now that would be kind of in terms of the themes that we're speaking about, but I think it definitely wouldn't be coming out of like American,
Mm.
like film industry would not be coming out of Los Angeles or Hollywood. But I completely agree in terms of like Gen C and Gen Alpha just thinking for something else, and that might just mean that we're looking for more films internationally. We're gonna be like fuck Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like when Squid Game came out on Netflix, like I feel like the international just like film industry and like entertainment industry is definitely making headway here in the states. Like Squid Game came out, and then Parasite, which I know Evan you did an episode on before. Like you know that we're getting that media is becoming mainstream. So I think that that's really cool.
And I think we'll see more of that too because of the writer's strike. I think there's a lot more room left for people to consume like international media too. So as long as that continues to be the case, as long as people have a reason to seek out things that maybe they wouldn't have watched before, they'll probably be exposed to more like radical sort of ideas than we typically see. Unlike, the stuff that's coming, and like the MCU.
Yeah.
And those movies are not doing as well in the theater as they used to, and I think that's they. I think these companies. That's why I think you do see a lot of these what I would call sort of light anti-capitalist movies. Glass Onion is another one where like they're vaguely ideas or the menu, which Smirk and I discussed. But those are like anti-capitalist theme movies, like this one is. But it's also only what the American media again is willing to accept in that
Mm-hmm.
mold. So, but it actually this isn't quite exactly what I was thinking. Bringing us back to the movie, but one thing I remember in the movie that we going back to the individual versus the collective thing. One of the scenes that I found interesting was when the princess and Z are dancing, and they have the whole everyone is doing like one specific dance, and they're deciding to kind of be different. And I mean, I feel like they're trying to create like Z, kind of having this little character growth where he's hates his job and doesn't know what to do. He's kind of lashing out and he's trying new things, and eventually he realizes that there is something to be said about this collective good. So I don't know what to. I don't know. I'm just what anyone thinks about that, or I guess I'm still thinking back about the collective versus the individual, how it's kind of opposite a little bit in this movie, where they seem to view collective as bad, as I think we were talking about before with the ball and everything. Working together is actually conformant, like almost conformity. I don't know. Maybe someone can make sense of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it definitely is portrayed that way at first, and like with the dancing scene, you could see like nobody's having fun. Like, come on, it's time to dance. Everybody get over here and do the same thing. And like, it's like the worst line dancing you've ever seen. But I think the way that they frame it later on changes it a little bit. Like, I don't think it really does serve us or does enough to sort of make up for the anti-collectivist spirit of the beginning of the movie. But I don't know. Yeah, definitely. I think the message is somewhat murky there because of that.
I agree. I think it was Destiny that said it, like in terms of like that, like maybe kind of like more of a neoliberal kind of. Like, that's what I kept thinking because at the end I was like, oh, okay, like what do you want me to know? Is it? And I guess it's just like it wasn't, and like it wasn't really clear, right? Because it's just like yes, and because I think it went back and forth. I don't know, maybe the writers didn't even know themselves or whatever, but like it was like at the beat, like collective is kind of bad, or look at you, you're just a zombie, everybody doing the same shit, and then oh look, you can use it for good, but also like individualism is so important, like make sure that you dance like freely, however the hell you want, and
It's like nobody's
I mean it was yeah, exactly, like yeah, dance with the princess, like fuck different social classes and whatever. um, so I still don't know how I feel about that. Like I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't know what they were trying to say.
Well, let me this again is like a muddled. Maybe it's because the writers in writing this movie don't really have any ideology. Maybe that's why I couldn't find anything. It's just
Mm.
throwing a bunch of sort of vague labor ideas kind of together, and not really having a cohesive, real idea of what they mean. So the whole part of this movie is that they're trying to find Insectopia, which is sort of this magical place no one knows where it is, which presumably has unlimited food and multicultural aspects to it. There's other bugs that live there. We don't really get anything except for the drunk bug at the drunk ant at that party. And one thing that I noticed is when maybe they do show Insectopia later, I think they specifically have it be very red and white, like the picnic blanket, and there's a lot of the colors are red and white. And I wrote in my notes sort of like, okay, are they trying to say that this is like America red, white, and blue kind of situation, like America is the ideal, or are they saying is it like communism is the ideal? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and I don't know what to make of it. Is that what is Insectopia supposed to represent to
Mm.
it and like to the movie?
I think
Really?
I think it's kind of a utopian ideal, and it's a misled one because the only reason that it exists is because there's a trash can there that people who have no idea of the existence of these bugs are just like cannot aim their stuff into the trash can at all. Like it's been there for so long that there's like legends about it. So clearly nobody's cleaning it up. So the only bugs you see there are like, kind of like hippy dippy, like stoner types, and they're all just hanging out, and they have like a sort of an idea of like collectivism and helping each other out because they're like, oh well, he hasn't gotten any wood yet, so they send him to go get it. But it's not really like they're not like doing anything for themselves. Besides that, they're helping each other a little bit, but I think it's sort of utopian. Like it's unrealistic. Um,
Well, like they're not doing anything because like they don't have to work to live. Like, it's kind of like they're outside of this mindset of like a scarcity mindset because they have the resources that they need. Like, you know, they have food if they want it. They could go do something else if they want to because they don't have to worry about starving later. So like, you know, it kind of is like a visual representation of like what it could be like if they had access to the resources that they needed every day without, you know, having a manager tell you that you have to do this, or, you know, some prescribed, like you're either a worker or you're in the military, like that that's not really even being thought of because like you can do whatever you want to. Like you got food, no worries. And Evan, going back to like what you were saying about the red and the white, that like I know that like red is a color supposed to make you hungry. Like that's
Okay.
why like a lot of brands will use it. Like if you think about McDonald's or like Red Robin or, you know,
TGI Fridays,
exactly, they
Chick
use
Fil A,
red
every, yeah.
because
All
it's
you're
supposed
right.
to like make you feel hungry. So maybe like kind of matching like that. Oh, this is where food is. So like kind of evoking that, like
Yeah.
stimulating your hunger. I don't know.
My reach for this was that like this is just a ridiculous thing that I wrote down. Is I was thinking like, okay, if Insectopia is sort of like this communist ideal or just sort of this this utopian piece, then later when they actually reach it, Z reaches it, and then the shoe comes down and squashes them, and the gun. I'm thinking like that's the military intervention from America coming in and being like, we're just gonna come in here and just be like stomp, stomp, stomp. I don't know.
Well, that's before they
Yeah, it
really get
reminds.
the.
Oh, sorry.
No, no, no. You're good. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it reminds me of that like political cartoon, the boot of like capitalism, like literally crushing the working class.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Well,
That makes sense.
Well, the shoe thing, which by the way, that's this scene brought to you by PepsiCo and Reebok because it's like the only place they could fit any product placement in a movie about bugs. But the shoe comes down when they're at the thing they think is Insectopia. It's like there's a picnic there,
Right.
and there's and they meet the well-meaning liberal bees who come and help them out. The bee saviors.
wasn't
That
it a
scene is really
wasp?
funny.
I think so.
I don't know. I was like, I can't remember what wasps look like. So yeah, you're probably right. I don't know.
Well, because I just like remember thinking that like everyone can be like, I feel like there are more positive movies about bees, like the Bee Movie, and like they're just more kid friendly, but like wasps are supposed to be like scary and like it really hurts when you get stung by a wasp. So I just thought that it was like kind of interesting, that juxtaposition of like he was actually like a really friendly dude and was just like, dude, I'll take you to your place, like no problem, okay. So like it kind of just turned that a little bit. But like the picnic we were talking about before, that like I think that it's kind of like escapism. Like he uses trying to get with the princess as escapism, and then like, oh, now he's on this mission to go to Insectopia, and like again that's escapism. Like, and Evan, you were saying that that could be like the closest thing to communism within the movie, and that like I don't know. I do kind of feel like it was kind of like a jab at leftists of like, oh, you think we're gonna have like a communist state, like that's idyllic, and like that we haven't really like, we sometimes like when we're presented with opportunities to make progress, like we take like a neoliberal approach, and so like kind of like Alex was saying of like the mixed messages of like, well, like, are you with us, or like, I don't get it because you're like kind of also shitting on us for having dreams of communism.
Yeah, like for me, I kept for that scene when they were what Insectopia. I'm just like, okay, so it's still dangerous, right? Because it was like a human, right, or someone that like stepped on the WAP's like wife. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. Like again, I think it's another mixed messaging because clearly the ants are not safe in their colony anyways because like they have this fucking maniac that is like trying to like wipe them all out. But also it's just like, well, you're doesn't matter where you're gonna be, bitch, because it's like like life is dangerous. I don't know. I didn't know how I didn't know how I felt at any moment.
I feel like that part, like the whole insectopia thing, reminds me very much of the way like people who have just started to become like class conscious, or like they're sort of like waking up to like the like income disparity and like just the everyday injustices that we just kind of turn a blind eye to because our therapists give us permission to not leave emotional space for them. Um, they you get these people that are like, oh god, I'm gonna move to like an island. So I'm just gonna get out of the US because I can't deal with this. And it comes from a place of privilege, obviously. And it's like you said, escapism, but it's also like an abdication of group responsibility and like what we owe to each other. I feel like that's what the insectopia thing is, because first they get to the picnic thing and he thinks it's great, and then they get stepped on, and then he gets there and still he can't completely escape the problems that he's running from because she gets kidnapped and taken back to the colony anyway.
Right.
So
Oh my god, what you said, I just want to say that reminds me so much of so many Americans. When I said I lived in Mexico City, I lived in Mexico City 10 years ago. I'm also Mexican. Like my parents migrated from there, but the amount of Americans that have like taken over places and have just completely shifted the like raise the prices, like that whole like, oh my god, the digital nomads is just like fuck them, honestly, especially the ones that have been going out to Chiapas and Oaxaca. And it is that hippie. I didn't even make that connection, but it is kind of like that hippie, like, hey man, like, peace, love. It's just like, and it was when I was in Chiapas in San Cristobal de las Casas, you have indigenous groups that have been there, obviously, like their whole lives, and they're selling, their like artisanal art. And then you'll have some folks that are from like California or like Europe, and they're also like selling artisanal art, but also they speak English. So and they look all cool and hippie, and they're able to sell to the tourists way better than some of the indigenous folks from Chiapas because they're able to connect, because now you're creating a different other economy within the economy of a place that like is where indigenous folks and native folks have been living. It's just like, it's really fucked up. It every time I go back, it makes me feel some type of way, and I just
Not only are they
yeah.
like appropriating the art, but then also like literally taking the money from indigenous folks like in front of them.
yeah, and bringing their problems with them, which is what happens when the dude shows up and like threatens everybody and then kidnaps the princess and brings her back. Like you're not making things, you're making things better for yourself, but you're fucking up things for everybody else who's already here and now has to deal with cleaning up your shit.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
like those fucking people that go to like, I don't know, like tropical locations, and they open like fucking DMT retreats and shit. Like they do like psychedelic tourism kind of stuff. Like Guru Chad or whatever invites you to this island where we brought a lot of money, so like the authorities aren't going to bother us, but we're also going to destroy a lot of people's homes. So come here and trip with us. It'll be really enlightening.
And Jared Leto's there.
Cult membership is optional, but it is in fact encouraged.
Right.
For those who are listening, like, please just be very mindful when it is that you're traveling, especially to like Latin America, anywhere in the world that's not the U.S. because yeah, it's a lot.
Super, super important.
Yes, that's just. I was just going to add something to that, but I forgot what it was. I know what it was. It wasn't exactly related to this, but I know we talked about briefly the like the people, the other ants when they sort of decide to basically go on strike. You know,
Mm.
they throw their axes down. And there are actually a couple things that I didn't hear or notice when I was watching it. But one of the signs that they rip up said rest once, work twice.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone saw that. And then they also throw in like the worker ant saying like buzz off, you're the pawn of the oppressor. So
Mm.
the thing that I think again makes this movie muddled is that they have these like really great lines and great little snippets of, you know, okay, we all can decide to not work and there's nothing they can do about it. We are now on strike as the ants. Your tunnel isn't getting built. But then I feel like the message comes in with, I don't remember, you mentioned Smirk, like the mandibles sort of coming in and using like the fake populist message to get them all to go back to work. It's very
Yeah.
much what I would perceive as, you know, it could be a Republican or a Democrat, you know, coming in saying like, oh, well, you know, we have to do things collectively. Like I'm on your side, you know, I'm with the workers, and you decide to go back and you realize that they're just screw jobbing you. And I think that's exactly what happens here is the workers actually realize they have power, and then they come in and they take the power away immediately from them.
Well, he
Mhm.
lies to them too, right? He's like, "Oh, you can all have the day off. You'll be the guests of honor at the dedication ceremony." But then you turn, and there's still people working to open the fucking tunnel. So like, he's not even telling the truth, which is
He gave
yeah,
him a pizza
exactly what he
party.
said.
Like who cares?
You can wear
Casual Friday.
jeans.
My jeans.
Yeah, wear jeans on Friday. Right.
And it's so sad.
Only on
It's
Friday
oh,
and half the day.
breaks my heart. Breaks my heart when workers like we are so starved. We are so starved of any kind of dignity and respect that pizza or like being able to wear fucking jeans or having a day off as ants is like, oh hell yeah, like that's the best boss. It's just like because you're comparing them to like other massive pieces of shit, you know?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing. I don't know. Maybe this goes back to earlier on. Is that the only real way for the individual versus the collective? Like the collective is good in the sense that this is the only moment in the movie where they have some like class conscious. They reach a little bit of it, but they don't really know what to do from there. And they're like they don't have Z there to lead them along. Or I think that takes away from it. Kind of insulting to all the workers who are the ones that actually did decide to all collectively stop working. So I don't know. It doesn't. It goes back to the, you know, putting it all on one person. Like you really need to have all these people understand what's happening behind their actual actions for it to actually have meaningful impact or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think up until that point, it's like capitalist realism. Like all the workers are like, well, this is what we're doing, but this is the best possible way for us to do this. So we're not really going to question it. At that point is when it shifts a little bit, but it's really easily undermined that like little snippet of class consciousness because of what you were saying, Alex, because it's centered around a person.
yeah, I'm trying to think like what could this movie have done differently to make it more like, you know, more actually like left labor oriented, you know?
Mm.
And like little groups, man, little groups. Like just like having all the workers kind of just like
Yeah.
always like like having those conversations with each other. Like this is why we're doing this, right? It's not because of fucking D, you know, it's not because of this one, you know, man or ant, you know. Education is the way.
Yeah.
Handing out leaflets, putting things up to educate the people around there. Yeah, and then this. So again, I feel like all the notes I'm looking at now that I read them in the moment, everything like doesn't really make any sense because I don't remember who says this line, but they say, you know, now you can see how dangerous individualism can be. Like he directly says that in it. So it's saying individualism is bad, but for the wrong side, right? Like it's again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Who's saying that? I think that was Mandible saying that, right? I think I'll look.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you make parallels to like the Reich, like the Third Reich and like Nazi Germany and everything, like that's very much in line with their messaging, like the sort of propaganda, like everything is for the good of the country and the family. Individual goals and individual desires are bad. it's all for the country and the family. Like that's those are the institutions you're here to protect. That's what we're all about. I don't think it necessarily flies in the face of collectivism. It just depends on how it's framed. Like the way that it's presented can either be for good or for bad. Like if it's individualism that encourages like diversity and recognizing individual contributions and your right to present and express yourself and live as you would like without harming others, that's good. But if it's about squashing individualism because that's dangerous to others because you're not in line with whatever fucking weird eugenicist bullshit is going on, then that's bad, I guess. I don't know. It's again, it's like it's really like murky. Like I don't know. There are definitely ways they could have done this better to make the messaging more clear if that was their intention. Stop. Oh my God, sorry.
Well, that's what you're saying, Alex, is like, what could you do to make this movie better? And I don't know that I have necessarily ideas for this, but this is like, again, going back to our just talking about what's wrong with Hollywood and the kind of movies they're coming out with. You need, whether it's internationally or groups like Means TV, where they're, can make movies that actually do, even if they're even short movies or TV shows or things in small bites, because producing a movie is expensive and obviously it's hard for independents to do that, but anything where you can actually push these kind of messages but in like a funny and interesting way that I think people, like you're saying, Destiny, like Gen Z, and they crave and want this kind of thing. I think back to like how popular the show The Office was to them during COVID, and I don't know if that's maybe the right analogy, but I feel like they have some, because that's not a show necessarily. That shows like the doldrums of capitalism, not like the good aspects of it. But in some ways, it's almost like you watch The Office to almost, I don't know. I don't know why that was so popular or where I was going with this, but there's things like Means TV and those kind of things need to create content that people now want because Hollywood isn't doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like people are much more invested in like content creators and like, supporting the people that live in their phone and like catching up with their favorite like podcast or, like content creating is like an actual job now. And like I think that Hollywood really has to kind of come to terms with that like people are more interested in the parasocial relationships they can build with others on the internet, like social media has definitely influenced the way that like we see celebrities or content creators or whoever, like for example, like Catherine Manning, I love her, she's a vlogger, and like she just had a baby, and like I know all these weird things about her life because like I watch her vlogs, and like I gotta catch her weekly video. And I feel like, at least because I teach high school, and like a lot of the kids, they just are on TikTok or YouTube, or like they're not really watching movies or like TV shows unless it is like like when Wednesday came out, they were very much into that. But like otherwise, they're really like on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, like supporting creators rather than like traditional media, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think you can definitely see it, especially on TikTok. I don't know if you guys like noticed, but there's like, I know like there was like an issue with Gap, like the store. They were like
Mm-hmm.
trying, like also, I think it's also generational, but they're trying to use the same mimics of like on marketing for a new generation that has been exposed to like the digital world since they were fucking like since they were born. So it's just like it's not working the same,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's gonna be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Yeah, well, and like kind of taking it back to the movie, like this movie came out in 1998. So, like, I just think about what was going on then. Like, a lot of older millennials, like Evan. Like in the 90s, you're like graduating high school or graduating from school, and like you're being replaced by machines. I think that there was this big consciousness of like as the internet was growing that you know really we have to like have labor power, like because we're being replaced. And I just think about like what was popular then. Like Radiohead was really popular, and I feel like Radiohead is very like anti-capitalist. And so those the people who were adults then, now their kids are the ones who aren't taking any shit and want to see those different themes and see things look and feel different in the world. And so it's kind of cool, like I said before, to see it in real time.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, is that younger Gen X and like millennials and older millennials specifically, their kids are the ones who are now like their bullshit detector is mostly a lot better than ours was, because we just, and I'm speaking for like people, like mid-range millennials, but we didn't have the influence of people who weren't totally like bought, sold, and paid for by like the systems that are currently in place. Like both of my parents are super conservative, and yet to a point they were like, question things, like pay attention. But now you have kids whose older siblings and whose parents have already run the gamut of like going from that to like realizing that shit is fucked up and something has to change. Because I can't speak for everybody, but I know as a parent I'm a lot more honest with my kid than my parents were with me. And he's only 6, so there's that. They have the benefit of being raised by people who pay attention and who have been lied to and know what that feels like. I think that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, to add to this story is just today, my older daughter is 9, and she was telling me about some YouTube channel because that's all she watches, YouTube, and people playing video games
Yeah.
is like the thing that they like. But she was telling me about some YouTube channel, I can't remember what it was now, that has millions of subscribers, where they do like little news bits and talking about things that are sus in the world. And she was going on about something that she had heard about, a video that she heard where TikTok was stealing our likeness and selling it to China. It was basically the title of this video. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So I watched the video to see what it said, and then like was talking to her about it, saying, we need to actually question these things. And at first she was pushing back, saying, oh, they're telling me this, it must be true because this is like a truth channel. But then telling her that she actually asked the question, and she now was like, oh, well, maybe they weren't totally saying that. And I think that the kids in that age and around that age are able to are easily can be taught these things. Like the big thing about this podcast in general is just media literacy is just complete shit for most people.
Yeah.
And like being able to detect and understand what's going on in the world through media is, unfortunately, most of us of our whole lives have just been propaganda and all that. So I think teaching kids those kind of things is important.
Yeah, peeling back the layers and realizing that sometimes it is that fucking deep. Like that's huge. Like people need that, because otherwise you are being propagandized to constantly and you don't pick up on it.
Yeah, like Alex, you were like, I know it's just a movie, it's just a cartoon, but like, it's very important to like ask these questions and kind of, do exactly what we're doing right now, analyzing and really breaking it down.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I think a lot about like youth. I have I have an older sister and 2 younger sisters. The 2 younger ones are Gen Z. One is basically Gen Alpha because she's at the cusp. Um, and so I know that I like she calls me her second mom because I was like at home when she was born for like the first 2 years. So it's just like the fact that she has, and also we're first gen Americans, right? But like the way that I was taught from my parents of like anything that your teacher is telling you is absolutely right. You shut the hell up and you take the information and you do not talk back, especially as a woman of color, right? But it's interesting because my little sister is obviously a woman of color too, but they're growing up with older sisters who are women of color who are going to be like, like, no, actually do question things, question even our parents, question even me, right? And
Mm.
it's just like, and you can see that like kind of like you see them taking the time to be more reflective, which at an age that I was never, like she's 13 and being mindful or asking questions about what's going on in the news, or like she's also on YouTube, like they love YouTube, right? And TikTok, and it's just like, and they'll have these conversations about really deep things, and I just think that's just like so powerful. I also know that it can definitely get like, it could turn bad real quick depending on who like who are
Mm.
the adults around these children as well. But but yeah, that's why I think media literacy is going to be even more important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like again, to take it back to the movie is, all the people in this colony are just taking at face value sort of what their boss or this like military leader is telling them. He's like, oh yeah, you're building this tunnel for the good of the community. You're doing these things in your community, or the things that U.S. government is doing it for the good of your freedom, whatever level you want to take it with, like the highest macro level, and they just go along with it. They don't question it. They don't have any. They just they just go right along. And I think if anything could be taken from this movie, aside from its kind of muddled message, is that you should question authority and you should
Yeah.
learn and read about what actually is happening, because most likely what they're telling you is just a bunch of lies, or they're yeah, that's it.
Well, because
Well,
it all starts to change once they're talking to each other too. Like that one scene when everybody's finding out about what Z did, and they start to have a little bit of consciousness. Then it's because they're talking to each other. And prior to that, you don't really see people like socializing in a way that's really like
yeah.
leading to anything. So it's huge. Yeah.
And them asking like the question why, like when the middle manager guy comes over, I forget what it was, but just I wrote it down because he's just like, they're so like, oh, you need to keep working or something like that, right? And they're like, why, you know? And I just think
Mm-hmm.
that's just like, that's if we could teach anything to like youth, it's like that. Just start asking why, like why, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. But I don't know. Go ahead, Destiny. Maybe I guess I'll take it to the anyone's last thoughts on the movie, or things
Um,
related to it.
well, I was just gonna say, like Alex mentioned the propaganda, like on the posters and stuff, and you said one was like, um, free time is for work, or what? What did you say? I'm sorry.
It said free time is for training.
Oh, right, right, right.
Yeah.
So, right now I'm actually reading Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devin Price. I definitely recommend it. I'm only like 50 pages in and I'm glued to the page. But it like reminded me of that, of like that it's in capitalism's interest for us to not have any free time. And especially now with like
Right.
the pandemic and how like out of necessity a lot of people started like working from home and like trying to monetize their hobbies, trying to make money online. And like even our leisure now has been monetized, and that like you can always be doing more, or like you could be making content, or like you know practicing your paintings, you can be a painter and leave your job, or whatever kind of like escapism that you want to use. But like even down to like your leisure time, that like capitalism has a hold of you. And in the book it talks about like because of the legacies of like slavery and imperialism, that like the US depends on unpaid labor, and like even in industries now. And like that all comes from like the Puritans coming to the Americas and colonizing, and like using their religion of like if you're lazy, then like you're not a godly person, you're not going to heaven. And like really use that and weaponize that to get enslaved people to continue to work um without like any pay or reparations or anything. And so like, you know, just that small little banner, like to me just kind of sparked like this whole inner monologue about laziness does not exist, and that like, you know, it's just a lie to try to get us to be exploited and give free labor.
Yeah. They mentioned in the movie at one point they calling them lazy workers specifically. I think it's a very intentional thing. So
Yeah.
that's it
What an
fits in
interesting
perfectly.
couple of words to put together.
For real, yeah. I don't think I have anything left on the movie. That's I'll pick a note to that book. I hadn't heard of that book, and it also reminds me of the book. I can't remember the author of the Bullshit Jobs book. I guess it's
Mhm.
I can't remember what it is. It's another good one, and then there's another related one, but I'll put them all in the notes. But I don't know, Alex or Smirk, did you have any last thoughts?
Um, just for folks to remember the power of collective action. You know, um, I guess I'll organize your workplace. Start there.
Yep.
Organize your workplace. Even especially if you are a union staff, you need to organize your workplace. Hit me up.
And if your state doesn't allow unions, see if you can join like a federal one.
Mm.
Like here in North Carolina, we're right to work. We're not allowed to have unions. Teachers aren't allowed to unionize,
Mm.
but you can still join like the federal union.
Yeah, IWW is a pretty good one. Like that's everywhere, and that's a good place to start. Um, uh, I would say like just even though the message is muddled, I think ultimately understanding that working together towards what collectively benefits everyone is always a better choice as compared to just working together towards what benefits who the hell knows, you know. And if you don't know what it is you're working towards, then ask why the hell not. You know, you shouldn't be so far disconnected from the fruits of your labor that you're like, what the hell is the point of all this? And connecting with people around you, even if you don't like them, because you're not going to like everybody. Some people,
Mhm.
you know, they're suck or they annoy you. It doesn't matter because you're like, more often than not, the people you're going to come into contact with and the people who live next door to you, you have a lot more in common with them than the people who don't want you to ask those questions.
Yeah, I think that's
100%.
Absolutely.
that
And
about
comment, like,
yeah.
share Left of the
And
Projector
subscribe.
podcast.
Oh, I didn't even have to say it. Thank you.
Don't forget to like and
But
subscribe.
but but thank you to Destiny, Smirk Gently, and Alex for coming on talking about ants and actually talking about collective action and working and unionizing, do all those things.
Thank
Always.
you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes,
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks,
always.
Well,
Evan.
you can
Thanks, y'all.
you can listen um, to your podcast, Destiny, Closet History, anywhere podcasts are available. This one
Yep.
as well, and you can follow everyone on this on all the internets and all the socials. So,
Yeah.
thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.